Well, hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Cindy Cooper. I'm the Director of Impact Entrepreneurs, and I'm here with Professor of Management Berrin Erdogan, and she's going to be talking to us about organizational behavior, specifically focusing a bit on social ventures today. So thank you for joining us, and thank you especially for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your interest in this topic, your research, your background.
I am a professor of management at Portland State University, and before coming here, I worked in a private bank, working in the training department, and then I went to get my PhD in human resources management at the University of Illinois at Chicago. So this ended up being my first job right out of the PhD program. As a professor, I do two main things. I teach and I do research. So my teaching interests are organizational behavior and human resources management at the undergraduate and graduate levels. But most of my time is also spent doing research on the topics of leadership and person-job, person-culture fit. So those are two key research areas for me. I do field research, which means going into actual organizations and studying them through survey methodology and writing the results in the form of journal articles and book chapters. So I've authored about 40 articles to date.
Wonderful.
Sure.
Can you tell us then, I know you can, a little bit about what is organizational culture and why does it matter?
Yes. Or you can think of organizational culture as an organization's personality. So in any organization, there are shared assumptions, values, norms, telling people what is appropriate behavior and what is inappropriate behavior. How are people expected to behave? And it's a shared understanding. It doesn't have to be written anywhere. It doesn't have to be in the rule book. It does not have to be consistent with anything the managers are saying out loud, but people know what is expected of them. So an example, let's say this is a very work-oriented company. You're supposed to put work first. If you receive an email at 9 o'clock on a Saturday, what are you supposed to do? So if this is a very work-oriented company and you know that work comes first, then you probably know that, well, I have to leave everything and start writing a response to this message. It can't wait until Monday. Because there are social consequences to behaving in a way that does not fit with the culture. So if the culture tells you to put work first, and if you don't, you'll hear about this. You might receive a phone call late at night. Or on Monday, people may start asking you, were you sick? So culture is it's the social influence on people's behavior. It forces people to conform. And it matters for two reasons. One, it is very important for explaining people's behavior. If you want to understand why people behave in a particular way, you need to look at the culture. It gives us a sense of what's giving people direction. And secondly, it can be a source of competitive advantage or it can be a liability for a company. So, for example, if you are working in an industry, in an environment where things change very quickly, move very quickly, you need a culture that is very agile. People are responding to information as it comes. They're not trying to be perfect in their analysis. Moving fast is important. So if you have a culture like that, that will serve you well. On the other hand, you might have a culture that is highly bureaucratic and very rule-oriented. In that environment, it might be a liability. So culture can be the source of a competitive advantage. It's a key resource because it's so hard to change and it's so hard to imitate by competitors. So those are the two reasons we mostly care about culture.
Thank you. So what are some of the most important elements of organizational culture that a startup should be thinking about?
Okay, so culture, we talk about culture, as I said, it's a company's personality. So it might have multiple dimensions. So you can think about 100 different personality traits. You can think about 100 different values a company may have. We talk about, in culture literature, we talk about 4 different dimensions of culture. So you can think of which of these elements fit with your environment and which one will be good for you to have and which ones would serve as a liability. So one of them is how innovative is your company, meaning how quick acting, fast-paced, action-oriented, self-driven are you supposed to be? How tolerant is the company toward risk-taking? Is it okay to take some risks and move quickly if it is going to get you somewhere, or are you supposed to be more patient and analyze the data and act later? So that's one dimension of culture, how innovative it is. Secondly, how competitive are you? Some companies are highly competitive, so they define success by outperforming their competition. Not necessarily reaching a particular goal or acting toward their mission, but how am I doing compared to these other companies in my environment? So those companies tend to have a culture that is quite assertive, quite aggressive. They might have a lot of metrics to control their employee behavior. So that's another dimension of culture. Some cultures are highly bureaucratic and rule-oriented. They have a lot of procedures, lots of rules and regulations about how people are expected to behave. And finally, we talk about a people-oriented culture, meaning how does the company relate to people? How much trust is there between employment and management? How do they see their employees as a cog in a machine? Or do they value people as people with their own individual goals and unique interests and desires? So those are 4 different types of cultures a company can have. So which one should you have as a startup? Well, it's a good question. I would say 3 of these are optional and 1 is a requirement. Meaning 3 of them, innovative, aggressive, and rule-oriented, bureaucratic, they may work depending on what you're trying to do, what type of an environment you are in. Most startups tend to start not very bureaucratic. They tend to be more innovative than other companies. They tend to have not too many rules. But if you're a nonprofit social venture, let's say, operating under a lot of grants, probably you will, over time, develop a very bureaucratic culture, which is good for you. You need that. You need a lot of procedures to ensure compliance. So it really depends on your industry and your particular mission. But what's very important to have for every company, startups and grown-up companies alike, is to have a people-oriented culture. We know that it affects retention. It gives you the ability to attract and retain the best people in the industry. And it makes you a great place to work for. And people become committed to the mission of your company. And one of the challenges of founders who manage their own businesses is they realize that not every employee cares about the business as much as the founder does. So that principal agency problem is what we call it. So we expect employees to act like owners, but they don't. But why would they if you're treating them like a cog in a machine? So how you treat your employees is going to create that ownership in the minds of employees that I care about this company, I'm committed to this company, I want this company to be successful. So people orientation is probably, I would say, all startups should cultivate effective relationships with their employees.
Thanks, that's a great example. So how about a social entrepreneur or intrapreneur? How can they create intentional culture?
Okay, so one thing to remember is you don't have to create the culture, you are creating the culture with everything that you do. So if you're a founder, if you are a high-level manager, if you're a manager, if you are in a position to create culture. So even if you don't think about it, you don't know that it exists, what you're doing is creating a particular culture around you. So it makes sense to pay attention to what you're doing that is shaping that culture. So one thing that you're doing that is very important to the type of culture the company is going to end up having is the hiring decisions that you make. So when you are a founder, you are starting the business. So the first few people that you hire into your business will share your values. Chances are you will hire people that you agree with in certain particular things that are very important to you. So those people will be driven to those core values. So those types of hiring decisions and weeding out people who don't fit in with that core value set will be an important influence on the culture. But besides that, every decision that you make and decisions that you avoid making, there are critical events, critical actions that managers, founders, entrepreneurs make or do on a day-to-day basis that send signals. You should know that you are the you're the person that other people are watching, and they're trying to make sense of your actions. They're trying to understand what is expected of them really. Not necessarily what is coming out of your mouth, but what are you rewarding? What are you expecting? So an example, let's say you're trying to establish a people-oriented culture, which I already said it's very important to do. How do you create a culture like that? So if you constantly schedule meetings at 5 o'clock, that doesn't necessarily communicate that you care about people's family lives or personal lives. So that is a signal that you're sending. Even if you say, yes, I value family life, it's your actions who speak louder. Or let's say you hired somebody who is brilliant at what they do, but they're miserable to work with. They create the toxic environment. So what do you do with that person? Are you rewarding that person because of their brilliance, or ultimately you realize that this person is creating low morale in your employees, so you say, well, regardless of how much you're doing for the company, we can't work with you, and you part ways. Those two actions send very different signals in terms of what type of a culture that you are going to end up having. So I would say one of the most important things a founder and entrepreneur is going to be doing is being very deliberate about the messages that they're sending with their actions, not necessarily always with their verbal messages, but what they're doing and how is it being interpreted.
Terrific, thank you. So how can a social venture hire in a way that supports its mission and culture?
Okay, so for any business, one of the most important decisions you make is hiring. And a lot of companies don't necessarily think about their culture when they're hiring. They hire for competencies, they hire for job-related skills. But one of the most important things that you can do to preserve a particular culture, or maybe create a particular type of a culture, is to hire the right people. So you should look for culture fit as well as job fit. And sometimes job fit may be 80%, and the rest of it can be taught to the person once you hire them, but not sacrificing the cultural values and the culture fit. That seems to be important, because people's personalities you're dealing with, you're not going to be able to change that. If they don't share your values, your company's values, then that is going to end up being a problem. So how do you find people who will fit into your culture? So that's an important question. How do you hire for culture fit? Because hiring for job fit seems easier. You can look for particular skills, but how are you going to know what they believe in and what their values are and select them? There are a couple of things that you can do. First of all, look at their background. How interested they are about the company's mission is definitely important, the social mission, etc., but that's not all of it. So where did they work before? Where are they coming from? So if you are trying to build a culture that emphasizes quick learning, quick acting, doing things without expecting a lot of external direction, let's say identifying opportunities, being proactive, if that person is coming from a highly bureaucratic organization and worked there for 15 years, that sends you, it is a hypothesis that needs to be verified, of course, but is that person going to be able to act in the way that this business requires? So that agility may have been just taken out of them. So that's something to watch out for. You can ask them culture-related questions, and some questions that companies ask include, what attracts you to this business? Why are you leaving your other company? What were the things that you liked and disliked in that other business? So those are some things that you would ask, or you can give them behavioral situational questions about how would you handle this, how would you act in a situation like this. So imaginative questions like that.
So forward-looking as opposed to describing a past behavior?
Yeah, but you can do either. You can tell them, you can ask them, okay, how did you handle a situation like this before? Or you can pose a dilemma and ask them to react to that hypothetical situation. Either way, it would work. But if you're looking for culture fit, you should not be the only person doing the hiring. So the more people from your company are involved in the hiring decision, the better of a sense of fit you are going to get. So to assess culture fit, it needs to be more inclusive hiring process where your employees also participate in the hiring decision. Get to spend a lot of time with that person. So instead of having one interview, have 4 different interviews, and just spread it out a little bit so that people get to know each other more. And one caveat, I need to say this, so culture fit sounds great, but culture fit doesn't mean that you hire that person because that person looks very similar to the people that you already have in the company. So that's the danger. So when you say this person doesn't fit with the culture, does this mean I didn't like this person? Or that person looks very different in terms of age or gender or background to the people that you have? Because I've seen a lot of instances where people claim that they are hiring based on fit, but it seems like they are hiring people that are very similar to themselves. It's kind of a self-affirming process. And that might really limit the diversity of opinions and really demoralize the workplace also.
That's a great point. And it struck me too that if you are interviewing to work somewhere, that a good signal is if you end up having to have a lot of conversations with a lot of different people at that place of employment, because they're assessing you for fit and you have the opportunity to assess them
exactly
as well. So.
Yes, and I would say person culture fit and misfit is one of the key reasons why people leave a company after a brief period of time even. So if you feel like a misfit, you are more likely to leave. So if you are looking for a job in a particular company, just trying to pay attention to those cues, spend time with them, read about them, ask a lot of questions to assess your own culture fit, because that influences your happiness and effectiveness in that company.
So tell me this, what is leadership?
That is such a big question. Yes. And really, philosophers have been writing about it for a long time. And so leadership, the simplest way to define it is the ability to influence other people. You're influencing them to do something that they would not otherwise do, and something that they were not already planning on doing. So you're changing their behavior. And you're changing their mind also. So you're not only gaining compliance, meaning they're doing it grudgingly, because you're the manager or because you have the ability to reward or punish people, but you really change their mind in a way that they become committed to wherever you want to take them. So it is that kind of influence. And I would say management and leadership are 2 different things that are often confused. So not every manager is a leader, and not every leader is a manager. So that means in the work group, there might be somebody else that people are actually listening to. That person is the leader. Maybe there's a wise person in the team, more experienced, more expert in what is being done. So the manager says, do it this way, and people just turn to that person and try to see how that person is reacting to it. So that person is the leader.
You know, it strikes me too, we talk a lot in our classes about self-leadership. That is true for the self-interpretation, that you need to be willing to learn and change and grow. So thinking about the parallel between leading others and influencing them to change and follow, but also yourself and the ability to be self-aware and emotionally intelligent about your own growth and development as a leader.
Yes, true.
Great. So what about being effective as a leader? What does effective organizational leadership look like?
Again, that is a hard question that philosophers and researchers have been studying for a long time, and there's a lot of information and misinformation about this. So researchers come up with a new typology every week almost. I mean, we talk about authentic leadership and servant leadership and transformational leadership, but when you boil down into what are these theories and studies showing, there seems to be two key things that leaders do, and people seem to react well to them, meaning they are being influenced and it affects their effectiveness and satisfaction in the workplace. So what leaders do is, first of all, they get things done, meaning they pay attention to the task at hand and they support their employees and their work groups to make them successful. So what do? They communicate, they talk to their employees, they share a lot of information, they identify the resources the team needs or the employees need, and they get them from the outside. They support the team in job-related tasks. If somebody's falling behind, they coach them. They're available. So that doesn't mean micromanaging people, but identifying what they need in order to be more successful and providing that environment. So task-related behaviors is one category of what they do. And secondly, they pay attention to people. So they build effective relationships with them. They are fair to the employees that they work with. They try to get to know them as a person. They invest in them, care about their career development. So it's not necessarily a matter of what are you doing for me right now, but what can I do for you to help you develop? And sometimes that means leaders make sacrifices from the organizational side to help their employees achieve their own personal goals. Meaning, let's say you have an employee who is looking for an advanced degree, but that means you're going to have to provide more flexibility. So that's a short-term sacrifice on the part of the manager, and if there are any future benefits, those are unknown. Maybe that person's going to get the degree and leave your company. That is a risk that you're taking. But still, effective leaders, people-oriented leaders, don't look at it as a cost-benefit analysis, but more like, these employees are working with me and I support them. So those two behaviors seem to be what matters for effective leadership. Now, how frequent or how much of those different categories you're supposed to demonstrate, it really depends on the team you're leading and the people you are managing. So sometimes it's all about the job, because employees need a lot of information. They need a lot of support. Maybe they're new at their jobs. They haven't figured out how to do it. So more personal conversations can wait, but what happens is you need to coach them and mentor them so that they are effective in their jobs. On the other hand, there are some jobs where they know what to do. The job is very stressful. So it's not a matter of telling them what to do or communicating or supporting them, but it's more paying attention to them as a person, as people, taking care of their emotional needs. So you need to identify, so effective leadership, which means depends on the people that you're leading and the circumstances under which you're leading.
Again, I'm reminded of emotional intelligence and being able to empathize and perceive those things and react to them in a way that then is constructive for that need, the particular situation.
And this is, I would like to say, in a social enterprise particularly, I've seen the people side can actually be neglected, which is a dilemma. I mean, so there is research suggesting that, for example, you might expect, comparing for-profits and non-profits, which one would take care of their people better? Well, ironically, non-profits have a lot of problems around people management, because when you have a strong mission, and that mission is something that people are really committed to, such as feeding the poor, eradicating homelessness, or helping the children. So it becomes very easy to focus on the mission and neglect the people that you're managing. So you might start expecting high levels of commitment to the mission. It's so important for us to serve the mission that you might start expecting people to work very long hours or underpay them or be understaffed. But you need to consider the people inside the organization as another group of people that you are trying to help or be supportive. So it's not only about the mission, and you can reach your mission by supporting the people that you are managing. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, absolutely, because that should be part of your mission too, right? I mean, it's all about serving the best way you can, including the people who are closest to the organization. So it makes perfect sense. What about mistakes? What are some of the biggest mistakes that leaders make regarding these issues?
I am going to, yes, I'll keep this around these issues. There are many, many mistakes that leaders make on a daily basis, but not realizing their role in influencing the culture, I would say, is one of the big mistakes that they make. So they think that just talking about certain issues, they will enact change, but it's really walking the talk, I guess, is a better way of thinking about it. So you might, for example, emphasize the importance of ethics, and you can talk about it all day long, but people are watching you as a leader. So if you're expecting people to use your sister's travel agency for all company-related travel, and that company does not necessarily provide better service, but you want them because it's your sister, that does not create a very ethical culture. So people watch what you're doing, not necessarily what you're saying. Hopefully they converge, but if they don't, what you do matters more. So I think that is one of the important mistakes that leaders make. Another one is assuming that once you hire people, your job is done when it comes to culture management. So hiring the right people definitely is important. So hiring for culture fit matters, but also you need to bring them on board. Your new employees are at a higher risk for turnover compared to people who've been there for a long time, because people who've been there for a long time have been there for a long time. They are less risky. Your new hires oftentimes find themselves quite alone. So nobody tells them what to do. Nobody takes them out to lunch. So there is a period of isolation. So they're new, they're trying to figure things out, but no help is available from anyone because the people are understaffed and overworking, and so that creates more urgency on what needs to be done. So one of the things that managers can do to deal with that is to be more deliberate about how you structure the first 2 weeks of the people that you hire. Be more deliberate in bringing them on board. Pair them with the right people so that they get a good start to being integrated into the company's culture. Just organize lunch dates for them every week, every day of the first week, let's say.
It's not about functional learning, it's more just being incorporated and integrated and feeling welcome and getting to know how.
So getting the relationship started on the right ground, right foot is going to make things so much easier than fixing a relationship that has gone wrong. So
great point. Thank you. Well, final question.
All right.
What advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are starting out to set them up for future success?
Yes. Take care of people. That they will be the reason for your success. They will be the reason for your failure. So surround yourself with people that you can learn from, people who share your company's values. They say you are the sum of the 5 people that you interact with the most. So that is a saying that I really believe in, and that's true for companies as well. I mean, your company is the sum of the people that are in it. So be very deliberate in your hiring decisions and then how you treat them. So, and also take care of yourself. So in this business, it is so easy to be burnout, neglect yourself. So it's all about the business, but it's also all about you. So don't burn out. Just have time. So make sure that your success is more sustainable. So if the success of your company depends on you overworking yourself and neglecting every other aspect of your life, that is not going to feel very successful, and that will not lead to sustainable success. So
great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time with us, your insights and expertise, and this has been very helpful for our understanding of the topic. So thanks so much.
Oh, sure. Thank you.